Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Onyx Duncan, and I welcome you to this Friday, 13th of December, Alliance for Change press conference here. And today we have, starting with us, is Dr. Vince coming to us live on Zoom.
You guys getting me? Hear me?
Yes, Dr. Vince.
Good. Hey, good afternoon. I don't know this is the morning, but good afternoon to all our listeners, and welcome again. I just want to be one of the many commentators on this 10% pay increases for the PSU workers. Many credible commentators, including none other than the former Minister Winston Jordan, have given their analysis on this insulting and heartless 10% increase for the public servants, teachers, and sugar workers, because I understand that Gaul has also just inked a similar type of a contract. So, I won't bore you again with the details, but I think it's worth the highlighting of some of the facts and repercussions brought to light and what this little increase means. First, considering how the people of Guyana are suffering financially for food, shelter, and the basics of life, we, the AFC, welcome help of any kind for all of our workers and people. Even if it's a contemptible $8,000, which is 1/50th or 2% of what the president will be getting. The AG and the ministers are also giving themselves. We have an obligation to stand up for our workers' right to fair treatment and fair share of their patrimony. This unfit for purpose second vice president, who, rather than behaving as a real leader, especially of a country, instead resorted to his next pure and propagandistic bullyism manner in using those who dare to criticize. Anyway, the real story behind this race are that one, the vice president himself yesterday in his press conference admitted, and I don't know if it was a slip of the tongue or what, that he said, quote, that it is not just the percentage, but how much in the actual money the people get, meaning that all 10% are not the same. To translate the VP's own words, this means that while 10% means $8,000 to the poor worker making $86,000 per month, it means $400,000 to the president who makes $4 million of taxable salary. You know, you got to be careful. I noticed that there, which were accurate, that folks are saying that his increase will be $290,000. That is $290,000 of tax-free dollars. The ordinary Joe does not get tax-free dollars. So if you compare the two, his $2.9 million really translate the taxable salary of around $4 million a month, which means 10% increase upon that is $400,000. So, which is, by the way, 50 times. His salary is 50 times what the person at the lower rung of the scale will be getting at $8,000. But don't let us forget that the Attorney General also is in that ballpark with $2.1 million of tax-free dollars. And of course, the ministers who are effectively getting about $1.8 million in effective salaries, they pay taxes. Which means in any case, they'll be getting, for that salary, they'll be getting $180,000. The bottom line is that they are enriching themselves while giving the workers this paltry pay raise. And by the way, let it be known that of great significance in contrast to President Ali, Mr. Granger never took a dime in the raise that were effective in the past administration. That is very important. However, the bottom line is that this government is in its usual self parading this unconscionable 10% as a massive increase while enriching themselves. And this is according again to the Vice President's own words that not all 10% are equal. To add to this hypocrisy and dishonesty and untrustworthiness to the people, these were the same set of people who, without shame, bashed the coalition for the 50% pay raise, but not saying a word that they have reneged on their promise to give it up when they get into office. I guess they said they were going to set up some kind of an account. Maybe they do have that account. I think the media should challenge them to show that account where that money is going. Instead, they're cleaning up on the spoils in the building upon this every PSU raise. Why haven't they kept their promise to give it up? A defining fact is that by their own words, this 10% will bring the workers' salary increase to 35%. That's what, when they made this announcement, that's what they said. The president himself said that over the 4 years, this increase was 35% over the 4 years. In contrast to the coalition, which increased salaries by 72% over their 4-year period in office. And listen to this, this is very important. This was without oil money. Without oil money again, the coalition increased public servant salaries by 72% in contrast to the government with oil money that increased it by 35%, which is even more than twice what this current government did. Further, as so well explained by Minister Jordan, in real net terms, when accounting for inflation, the coalition raises were about 14% net per year, because inflation at the time, of course, was in the ballpark around 1%. So it was about 14% net. That's what you get. That's what you actually gain in your pockets. That's what you get in your pockets in terms of value. 14%. Under this administration, this PPPC administration, it is 4%. 4% when you account for inflation. I think the overall per year is what, about 7-8%. So if you discount the 3% or so, it's down to 7%. Those are the facts that they can't run from, regardless how the vice president gets up there and present in front of the public. But let us not take this 10% in a vacuum, Diana, but rather as a reflection of the soulful interest of the PPPC. The heart and soul of political leadership is always reflected in its portrayed values by which the money goes, where the money goes, and as we know, 60% or exactly 58% of this government's money goes into infrastructure for only maybe 1% of the friends, families, favorites, and cronies. And half of this $666 billion is refutably being wasted. And we don't have to go too far, but remember the 5:30 a.m. masquerade of ministers and other leadership admitting corruption and wastages that were brushed aside in laughter. We hear excuses for wastages ranging from jumpy interferences at the cemetery road to bad blood between the oversight and engineer and contractor. Even the president himself had to dress down Minister Ejel for coming up with this nonsense about this foolishness about, well, the coming up with an excuse that the reason why the project was being delayed and they couldn't account for the money, etc., was because of a bad blood between the oversight engineer and the contractor. It's now coming to light, or being alleged, that the president and even the ministers have their own companies bidding for jobs, or projects, bidding for some of these projects. And then the vice president, as he always does, shoots from the hip, has the gall in one of his recent press conferences to compare what he was doing to what the United States government does with procurement and contract, which is absolute nonsense when he said that, well, Mr. Trump would never appoint somebody that basically doesn't do what he wants them to do. The President of the United States is far removed from all procurement and management of projects, very, very far removed. They have absolutely nothing to do with those projects. So Mr. Jaggi needs to shut his mouth and stop speaking of what he knows not. The bottom line is that this pay increase is nothing but only one of the many continued manifestations of the government disdain for the poor people of Guyana, as we also saw in the treatment of teachers and the cane cutters, and as we also hear the Vice President say over and over many times in his press conference that all the opposition wants to do with the oil money is feed the people. We're that with the budget one as in the opposition, and we will always make poor people our priority and make sure that they are fed well and they have the basics of life. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Vince. I'll now hand you over to Laura. Good afternoon, Laura.
Thank you, Onyx. Good afternoon, everyone out there. Thank you for joining us. So, I want to talk about the evidence of, the Dutch disease, but really address the mining and the approach that is taking in Guyana today. So, the Alliance for Change, we remain deeply concerned about the mining industry and what is the rapid decline in terms of declaration of gold and also in terms of human rights abuses and the lack of responses to that. So the reason I'm saying that is because we want to talk about the Dutch disease and how it can afflict or how it seems to be afflicting us today. But we also want to raise awareness that this Dutch disease, when we talk about, must also bring forth that there are a lot of reports of accidents and death in mining, in the mining sector. There are no clear responses in terms of how the families or dependents of those who are injured or those who have lost their lives in the mining industry, in the mining pits, are being dealt with. So what we're calling for is a rights-based approach in terms of human rights protections, the economic rights, and environmental rights. So taking all of that into context, what we're saying is that if we're focusing on gold, we want to talk about the numbers that are being, the numbers that are being reported to us. Now, before COVID hit in 2020, the miners of Guyana produced and declared almost 700,000 ounces of gold. Then the price of an ounce of gold was approximately US 1,700 or 1,700 USD. This was an equivalent of Guyana dollars 350,000. On the other hand, at the end of 2023, the average price of an ounce of gold was USD 2,000. And yet the miners produced and declared a paltry 209,000 ounces. Today, the price is approximately US $2,600 per ounce, which is USD 1,000 more than it was in 2020. But yet, we are told, with the reports that being declared, that production is plummeting. So there is a great contradiction here, perhaps a mystery. Irrefutable statistics show that in the past, as the gold price increased, the production also increased, as more persons were incentivized to enter the industry. The only acceptable explanation that can be given for why Guyana is the only country that is reversing this known economic trend is mismanagement, a disinterest in the plight of miners, among a lot of things to think about. The lawlessness that is allowed to take place at Marudi in South Rupununi captures the essence of the government's don't give a damn. That attitude. And it's not only the South Ripanoni. When we talk about the situation of Chinese landing, who are still seeking justice and for control of their rights to their lands, the right to be free on their own lands, and the right to decide on what to do with their resources. Those are just a few of the situations that communities or individuals face here in Guyana as citizens. We have a situation where in the mining industry, whoever wants to mine can do so with no regard whatsoever for the communities and the environment. Now, the PPP came to office pledging to rebuild the mining industry, one that was obviously in better shape than it is now, and fooled the miners that they had a better offer to make than the coalitions. Statistics don't lie. There were hundreds of thousands more ounces of gold produced during the coalition's period in the office from 2015 to 2020 than in the corresponding period of the PPP. The coalition had built and restored hinterland roads, offered incentives, conducted lotteries for small and medium-scale miners, and provided greater superintendence of the industry to curtail lawlessness and smuggling. The PPP swept into office with sweet words of promise, but instead of the glorious days they proclaimed, a deep darkness has set in. Earlier in the year, President Ali declared that a major increase in gold is imminent. This is obviously a pipe dream or another empty campaign promise that no one has any serious intention of fulfilling. The backbone and frame of the mining industry is built around these hard-working Guyanese, coming from villages and small communities mostly, and not these mega companies that swoop in and make press announcements to drive up their stock prices and then sell out and leave. The ordinary miner needs a bailout in the same way as well that the farmers and the sugar industry gets a frequent bailout from the government. The AFC is informed that the president met the miners secretly at the beginning of the year and gave commitments that he and his ministers would facilitate their reasonable requests. However, at the end of the year, over 80% of the deliverables promised have not been fulfilled. Refer, for example, to the refusal to renew investment development agreements granted by the Ministry of Finance under Mr. Winston Jordan, the granting of tax incentives on par with the agriculture industry, the review of the mining legislation, excuse me, and the rehabilitation and opening up of vital road links, just to name a few. So there were a lot of promises. Now, to make the mining industry a lot more equitable and accessible, here are some recommendations that the AFC would like to make as our initial recommendations. So to have publicly available and accessible digitized maps showing concessions allocated in their various categories. This will help miners in all various categories of mining to be able to say what investments they can seek. And this goes for communities who are involved in mining as well. Another recommendation is to have publicly available the process used for allocation of concessions. In this way, all citizens are able to keep track of the process and who is involved and what allocations are being given, allocations which are the country's patrimony, the people's patrimony. We also seek a report on what land reclamations have taken place, a report on how many injuries and deaths we've had in the mining industry, and what responses the government has been able to give to ensure that the dependents are fully supported in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lara. I would just like to acknowledge that we have Colin Ains online, and also we have David Patterson, our chairman online, and also our general secretary is joining us online. But I'll ask Colin to give us a statement.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk about the nursing crisis that we're facing in Guyana. And just to start with some statistics, we currently have about 896 nurses in Guyana. As you all are aware, Kaitra News ran this article last year. In the beginning of 2023, 146 nurses resigned. So they left Georgia Public Hospital now find themselves in a state of disarray because they're about 600 nurses short. So to run the largest institution in Guyana, we're running short. So that's about 55% of the capacity needed. And this is very troubling because when you don't have nurses, then patients will suffer. So you're operating at a very low capacity within all the units, which affects emergency department, surgery, critical care, and many different areas. Now, what's more troubling is also statistics countrywide. We currently are about 5.9 per thousand nurses per people. The standard across the world is about anywhere between 7 and 10. The ministry says that they need about 4,000 nurses countrywide. The previous government's manifesto, the coalition government manifesto, we call for building more nursing schools because nursing schools they matriculate about 250 nurses per year. So if we had about double the amount of nursing schools we have, because we only have 3 now in New Amsterdam, Linden, and Georgetown Public Hospital, then we could see about 1,500 nurses, and we could even move that up to 2,000 nurses a year. Now, my colleague Dr. Adams talked about pay. Why nurses are leaving is because they're not being paid adequately. I had some conversation with some senior nurses, and they believe that they need to be paid more. 10% definitely is not going to cut it. A group of nurses says that anywhere between $80,000 to $100,000 in benefits and salary would be good to keep them retained, to keep them comfortable to take care of their family, and so they don't have to leave Guyana and go to the UK, Canada, and the United States or greener pastures. And so I also want to discuss the quality of education because our nurses are not adequately equipped with the latest education, technological advances. We still have nurses that are struggling to give medications, IVs, and advanced knowledge in intensive care. And so that presents a great gap. And this is not only for, like I said, the largest public hospital, Georgetown Public Hospital, but across the board, across the country, these things are needed so that it strengthens the healthcare system. And also, I think that the other thing is that nurses, we need to have our nurses be more compassionate, being trained to be more caring and compassionate. You've heard the stories of patients are very critical, they're passing out in the emergency departments of Georgia Public Hospital, nurses just walking right past them. So we need to be able to chart a course where our nurses understand the mission, they understand the vision, they understand what is it like to be a nurse. They take that oath, the Nightingale, Florence Nightingale oath, who was one of the first quote unquote mother of nursing. And so those oaths that they take, they are to be able to administer and to treat and to do no harm essentially. And so that is lacking. And I think this all comes down to as well with our strengthening our institutions, which is training and education, having cutting edge research to know where we need to be meeting these gaps, and then also filling it with quality assurance, which is what I'm talking about, being able to understand the mission and the vision of the institution and why you're a nurse and why you're there. And I just also want to say, I know the news have covered this expansively, The government wants to bring in, I think, 500 Bangladeshi nurses. They've recruited at least 30 from Cuba, and there was also talks about bringing some from Zimbabwe as well. And we know that there's a shortage, and we need to meet that demand. However, given the current setup, given the inefficiencies, the ineffectiveness, the lack of institutional training, it will be very difficult to bring nurses from outside of our culture and have them now intermingle with the Guyanese nurses. And also paying them more will also create a lot more problems. We need to be able to move as a government, and this will be one of the things we will work on, is being able to pay our public servants a living wage, a good wage, to keep them comfortable, and so we'll be able to get more productivity and also greater retention as well. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Colin. I would like to hand over this portion of our press conference to the leader, Nigel Hughes.
Good afternoon, members of the press. Good afternoon, Mr. Jagdeo. Welcome. Today, there's two subjects that I want to address. The first one is GCOM. Yet another week has passed since GCOM has announced that Dr. Kissoon should not legally be in the National Assembly, and yet another week of inaction by GCOM to have Dr. Kissoon removed from the National Assembly. It is a very simple process by which they can issue or issue a certificate, decertifying her, or alternatively recall the certificate they had issued before. This continued lack of action by the chairman of GCOM in facilitating the continued presence in the National Assembly of someone who is not entitled to be there continues to perpetuate what is now a region-wide and international embarrassment for the country. Having announced to the world that you made a mistake and that the consequence of your mistake was that there is a person sitting in the National Assembly who ought not to be there, one would have expected prompt action by GCOM. Instead, we've had delay against delay and further delay. This, as far as we're concerned, further fortifies our demand for the chairperson of GCOM to go. Inaction in a matter of this level of national crisis is unacceptable by any measure. And to believe, like the ostrich, you can bury your head in the sand in the hope that this storm will blow over is not a particularly constructive approach to dealing with what is obviously a national problem. And therefore, we wish to repeat for the third time that the chairman of GCOM must go. If she didn't want to go before, despite admitting her error, it is her inaction and GCOM's inaction that must be the strongest reason for us to demand that she goes. The second, and as I'm on that, I just want to say another week has passed and the census has not been released. So we're now way past the end of November. I see there's somebody who wrote a letter to the editor today echoing the call for the release of the census. And again, we assume that by doing nothing, somehow or the other, this crisis will blow over. The other matter that I want to speak about, there are actually two. First one is the question of the National Resource Fund. In this season of goodwill to all persons, we call on the fourth-term president, who had a very active press conference yesterday, in the spirit of goodwill of the season, to actually propose an amendment to the National Resource Fund Act that will allow the opposition to nominate a representative on the board of the National Resource Fund and also on the Oversight Committee. As you're all well aware, the opposition has only been allowed to nominate a person to the Investment Committee. And that person, Dr. Terence Campbell, last week in a letter to the editor, disclosed several disturbing aspects of what is happening with the National Resource Fund and its release. We believe that in the spirit of national interest, that an opposition representative ought to be proposed and ought to be allowed to nominate a representative both to the Oversight Committee and to the board. Secondly, we have observed yesterday when the fourth-term president held his press conference, he chose to attack Dr. Campbell and call him a racist. That was a dog whistle. And today, we have seen on social media several citizens calling for the boycott of Dr. Campbell's businesses. I don't believe that if you are as responsible as a person who is serving their fourth term as president and who reminded us just yesterday that he became president at 35 and now at 60 he's still president, that it is a responsible act to call a citizen out, a business person, as racist when there's absolutely no basis for doing so, and thereby trigger your supporters to commence a boycott of the business of that citizen. The danger with this sort of activity and this sort of action is that there will be a reaction. And then the entire business community will be governed by a series of calls for boycotts of several businesses. Because if Mr. Campbell's business is going to be boycotted because the president called him a racist, then you can imagine what is going to happen in the society. And therefore, where there has been a direct attack on the economic viability of a citizen who chose courageously to comment on the National Resource Fund, he didn't attack anybody. He spoke specifically about the Natural Resource Fund and how it was managed. And he specifically spoke about a politician and their opposing views at different times, which are convenient to them. He ends up being identified as a racist, and his business is now being the subject of a boycott. We believe this is going to be very bad for business in Guyana, particularly at Christmas, and we can well imagine the consequences that will follow this sort of action. So we believe the responsible thing to do at this point is for the fourth-term president to perhaps withdraw those comments, because, of course, I don't believe that it is healthy if we start inviting people to boycott businesses on the basis of your categorization of them. And we're far past the stage where people are just going to sit down, lie down, and take it. Somebody else is going to call for the boycott of somebody else's business because of something else they did, and then this may well spiral out of control. So we believe that in the spirit of goodwill for this season, let us all take a step back and make sure that whatever we do is in the best interest of Guyana. I thank you.
All right, thank you. So that sums up everyone here at the head table. I will now take questions from the media. And just remember, you can ask one question. If you have a follow-up to that question, I will allow you on the basis of that question. So I see Livewire News, hand has been raised. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. I have several questions. Will I be allowed to ask them once I get through the first one?
Once it's a follow-up, I can allow that, but let's see.
No, after others would have asked.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So my first question is for Mr. Hughes. So Mr. Hughes, recently you claimed that 5.4 billion of the oil revenues is missing. However, 60% of the oil revenues are reportedly untouched and remain in the NRS fund. Can you clarify your position on this matter and provide some evidence to substantiate your claim?
First of all, I don't think I used the word missing. If you're referring to my Facebook post, what I said is, where is the 5.5 billion? And then I had an image with the cost for the construction of 131-story high-rise, high-value apartments on Central Park, which costs $3 billion. The inference, and forgive me if you fail to see it, is that the monies that have been spent or purportedly supposed to have been spent that came from the National Resource Fund, when you compare them to other projects, clearly there are no projects that to justify the monies that they claim that have been spent. So that was the context in which I said it, and you're very happy to look at my post.
All right, thank you, Livewire. Anyone else want to go? I see Livewire hands has been raised again. So Livewire, you can go and ask your next question because I don't see any other hand.
Mr. Hughes, I want to touch on the statement you just made about the boycott of businesses. Could you say why the country did not receive such a similar sentiment when several representatives of opposition groups called for boycotts of Guyanese businesses overseas due to the visit of the head of state?
If I can say why the country did what, sorry?
No. I'm asking why Guyanese did not hear the same statement that you just made in relation to boycotting businesses and that kind of thing, when several representatives of the opposition, both AFC and the APNU, would have called for boycott of businesses, social media influencers, activists who represent the opposition.
Right, but perhaps I can only speak for the Alliance for Change. Can you identify who in the Alliance for Change called for a boycott of overseas businesses? Because I have no knowledge of this, and I'd like to be able to address it.
I mean, as far as they're not overseas, though, you have any business boycott generally.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, David. If you can help us by identifying which AFC person called for the boycott of any business at any time.
Well, like I said, several social media influencers.
Sir, all I'm asking for,
claims to represent the opposition.
Mr. Jones.
Persons who claim to represent opposition members.
Mr. Jones.
Called for boycott of businesses.
Mr. Jones, you appreciate that we hold this press conference as an Alliance for Change press conference, and we have a responsibility to be specific and to respond to the press. You have made an allegation that an AFC representative has called for the boycott of businesses. And I am inviting you to tell me who it is so I can address it frontally, publicly. Telling me that allow me, if you don't mind, telling me that other opposition people and social influencers, I don't speak for them, and I cannot pretend to speak for them. So just tell me which AFC person called for the boycott of any business, whether in Guyana or in overseas.
Okay, let me reframe the question, if you would allow me.
Oh, be my guest.
Do you think it was fair for the businesses overseas that the boycott was called for? Do you think that should have been allowed, or do you think, as a political party, you should have said something in the interest of those overseas-based Guyanese?
Well, first of all,
because of their business, just as Mr. Campbell.
Right. So first of all, I recognize the right of people to advocate for whatever they want. We live in a world in which people are allowed to say what they want. So I wouldn't say that I oppose that. Specifically in relation to targeting businesses for political purposes, there are some circumstances, like in the United States in the 60s, when the civil rights movement boycotted businesses. And an economic boycott is effective in certain circumstances. More recently in South Africa, during the apartheid era, there were calls, I think justifiably, for economic boycotts. Now, if you're asking me as leader of the Alliance for Change to justify a non-action by the Alliance for Change, as you seem to be alleging, before I got into office, it would depend on the circumstances. And as far as I know, the Alliance for Change has always stood on the side of 1, free speech, and 2, responsible political action. And I believe that you have acknowledged by your second question, or the reformation of your question, that you cannot identify anybody from the AFC who has been involved or who has called for a boycott.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jones. I just want to acknowledge our chair online, Mr. Patterson, and also Dr. Vince, if you have any questions based on oil and gas. And I see Adam's hand is raised. Adam, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is to Dr. Colin Haynes. Dr. Haynes, you talked about the nourishing shortage. and I acknowledge that nurses are leaving in droves. But what would be your reaction to the fact that the government, as soon as it came into office, actually shut down the Charles Roses School of Nursing program, thereby affecting the training of nurses? And I also want to ask about a comment that was made some time back that we would be training 1,000 nurses a year. I don't know if you're aware of that, but what has become of that program?
Thank you, Adam. Well, this really shows the government's incapacity, incapability, and visionlessness. I mean, you have a nursing shortage. You know, you've established there's 4,000 nurses you're shorting across the country. You only had 3. I think now we have 2, right, Adam? Because you closed one of the nursing schools, and so you would have been matriculating 750 nurses. You're now matriculating 500 nurses. So it'll take you 8 years to get 4,000 nurses. Look, the government doesn't have a plan how to get us to, and even, let's not even talk about 1,000 nurses, because there's no plan. The real way to solve this should be to increase the amount of nursing schools we have. I'd say we need to double it at this point in time. So we need to open up the next nursing school. You know, the minister a few years ago denied closing the nursing school. I don't know, you know, what his problem is. I guess he has amnesia or something, but he denied closing the nursing school. You said something, Adam?
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so now, again, there is that gap, that deficit, and like I said, I think we need to increase that to have 6, where we will be pushing out somewhere between 1,500. We can also increase enrollment in these schools to provide for capacity, so you can now bump that up to maybe, instead of 250 to 300. And the next thing, like I said, I think we need to make nursing a competitive job. If you look across the world, and I dare to say to look at the developed countries, but nurses are getting paid in Guyana, it's somewhere between, let's say, $24,000. The average nurse in America gets paid $75,000. That's 3 to 4 times more.
On your page.
And so we can't pay them the $75,000 a year. But like I said, I talked to nurses, very experienced nurses. They're saying, Colin, look, what we can do is we would like to get additional salary and benefits, and that's why I've been a great advocate for increasing our salary about $80,000 to the tune of $200 million US, which is all paid for. We have the money, right? $200 million. You know, we're holding fancy balls and those things. We could invest it in our people, right? And next thing I want to tell you, I'm not a doctor. I know there's this fascination with doctor. I'm a public health practitioner, and you know, I have an MPH, but I'm not a medical doctor. Just a point of clarification for that.
Onyx, just could you allow me just 1 minute here to add?
Go ahead.
What I think is very important.
Go ahead, Dr. Vince.
This here is not, and I think it shows the limited vision of this government. This here is not just about nurses. You know, one of the core responsibility of any executive, whether in private sector or in government, is to attract the best and to retain the best. And you know, when you hear the leadership of Guyana, when the question was asked in the press conference, and I thought even the vice president and the president said this, when they were asked, you know, how do they fix the problem with professionals such as nurses and teachers and even people who graduated from the University of Guyana. We had people, 80% of the graduates from the University of Guyana was leaving the country. And when the question was asked, how do you fix that kind of a problem? You know what was the answer? The answer was, well, that's expected. You know, the question was, if you're investing in these folks, and they're leaving,
So they weren't hearing
the basic answer was that is expected. It shows the limited vision and a government that doesn't have a clue as to how to manage anything. So that is the problem. Look at the teachers. You know, we talk about the nurses' salaries. Here in an oil-rich economy, in one of the richest countries on the planet, and by far the richest in the region, and we have the countries, islands such as Grenada, that produce spice. Nothing is wrong with that. You know, I'm just trying to compare. We've got oil, you know, that is making billions that Grenada would love to have their hands on, and their teachers are getting twice what our teachers are getting. Look at Antigua, getting 50% more. Dominica of all places getting twice, paying their teachers twice what we're getting. And I could go on and on. Trinidad and Tobago twice. But the point I am making is not just about teachers, it's the visionlessness and the incompetence of this government that does not understand how to run, but I don't even go as far as the government because that is obvious, how to run anything, period.
Thank you, Dr. Vince. I see your hands raised live wire, but we'll take a question from Milton Granham. Please identify yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. Milton Granham for Starboard News. I have two questions. The first one for Mr. Hughes. Following the several listening and grounding sessions you held over the past week, have you concluded that you will be forming a coalition with any of those political parties or any of the others? And I have another question for Mr. Patterson. Should I ask that now or should I wait?
Yeah, please go ahead.
And for Mr. Patterson, do you still stand by your claim that the Exim Bank did not approve the loan for the gas energy project, though it was reported in the media that an official from the Exim Bank confirmed that the loan was approved?
Perhaps I should answer first. We've had listening groundings for about 3 months. Our position remains the same. Once we are in listening mode, we have not yet reached the stage where we are going to make a determination of a large coalition, a smaller coalition, or what sort of coalition. But I will say that we are committed to the benefit of Guyana, and that we are not against coalitions. But we have not finished our listening and grounding, and therefore it would be highly premature at this point for me to be able to say that we have arrived at a particular position.
So for the parties that you've done it with already, can you conclude that you might?
Everything is possible in the world, isn't it? You would agree? I mean, if you're asking me if it's possible, anything is possible.
So you're saying there's a possibility that you might, for instance, collate with Anna. You met with Anna last week. Are you saying that there's a possibility?
We can't, you agree that coalition is a consensual thing. I think Anna has specifically said they're not collating with anyone. So that rules Anna out from any possible coalition because their public position is that they're not going to collate with anyone.
Gotcha. And the question I posed to Mr. Patterson?
I think he will respond. David, are you there?
Should I repeat the question?
Well,
Yeah, sorry. I muted. My apologies. I was speaking and answering the question. Myself. Ms. Milton, there's a process of approval for any loan, and I went through this. So let me start off with the loan being approved. There's a process. There is a pre-approval. There's a board meeting, and the board meeting said, well, we have no. Let us go to stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. And the final stage, obviously, is has to go back to the board. The loan was put up for public comment, and I was quite intrigued to see that there was quite a lot of public comments on it. Of course, they didn't allow you to see who commented, but I know several different organizations that would have commented. And all these comments, and most of the comments that you saw were objections to the project. So all these comments have to be evaluated, reassessed for their merits, and then obviously approach reports. And then at the end of that process, the summary is put in and goes back to the board for approval. So as the saying goes, nothing is final till it's final. So the vice president, in its usual bombastic way and braggadocious way, got the control and fully said it out. Instead he said to the nation, we just moved from stage 1 to stage 2. He announced the final approval, which I debunked, and you can go on to the website. As I told Livewire last week, you can go on to the Exim Bank website right now and see the status is still an independent state. So I mean, it's not a big contentious matter. This is a normal process. Even in Guyana, your mortgage is approved until it goes to court and you sign the mortgage over. It's a process and it's not been finished and it's not approved. But plus that explains it. I mean, experiencing every week. Plus that clarifies it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to find out if you still stood by the state.
Yes. I mean, but this is easily researchable. Exim Bank website is very, very open.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patterson. We'll now take a question from Adam, and then we'll go to Cordell. Adam?
Yes. Mr. Hughes or anybody on the panel. Now, yes, I saw posts about Dr. Terence Campbell being considered a racist. Are you aware of any comment he made that could be considered racist? And my base question is, do you think this is an attack to hurt a successful black businessman?
I think it's clearly an attack to hurt a businessman who has expressed a view that has not found favor with the fourth-term president, currently characterized as vice president. I wouldn't even go, one doesn't need to go to the fact that he's African at this point. The fact that a businessman has criticized a politician, former president, still serving de facto fourth term, and that becomes a basis to describe that businessman as racist, being a dog whistle call, I condemn that. Mr. Campbell's ethnicity is evident. The disadvantaged position economically of people of African descent in Guyana is also a matter of record. The fact that people of African descent don't get the same opportunities as anybody else, that's a matter of record, that's a matter of data that can be established. So I am prepared to go as far to say that the president who picks a citizen who is a businessman, calls him a racist, knowing fully well that that's a dog whistle call to his supporters to boycott that business. And I saw this afternoon that Mr. Burke has published a page from Mr. Sanjay Puran calling for the boycott of Mr. Campbell's businesses. You know that it's a matter of law of physics. In every action, there will be an equal and opposite reaction. So it's just a matter of time before there's going to be a call to boycott somebody else's business of a different ethnicity. And therefore, if you want to have a Christmas of boycotts, where people are going to say, don't go here, don't go there, and all of this is based on ethnicity, we're going to have problems. So, I think the responsible thing to do at this point is the person who started this needs to be able to come out and be big enough and withdraw it, because it's going to trigger a series of reactions. I'm just saying that. I'm not wishing it. It is as sure as night will follow this day, that is going to happen. And then we are going to push this country into another space which is dangerous, where it is further divided, and the pathway back to unity and reconciliation is going to be made even more difficult.
Thank you so much, Nigel. I'll take the question from Mr. Jones.
So this is two parts, one for Mr. Haynes. Mr. Haynes, could you say to us, if somebody goes to the Charles Moses School on Monday, if they will see a closed door and nobody there? And this other question is for anybody on the panel. Now, the AFC has alleged that the mining sector is suffering from the Dutch disease under the current government. Could you clarify the economic metrics or the analysis that the AFC has relied on to arrive at this conclusion?
Thank you for your question. So The figures that we've produced are based on government reports that are coming out, released from Ministry of Natural Resources, and covered by the press. So if you want to ask if it's the Dutch disease, well, what we're saying is that the decline of the gold production, whilst we see an increase in the price of gold, then it's not matching. In addition to that, the decline of the gold production means that this will affect the miners who've been the backbone of the country. Because our main focus also seems to be on the oil and gas revenues, which also, if you saw today's press, the ECLAC report says that the revenues from oil is going to offset or balance the decrease in what we get from gold, other minerals, and timber resources. So the question is, and the balance is that, how is it that we have this decline in the sector, but at the same time, at the same time, we're depending on the production of oil, but we have infrastructure development happening, but we're not seeing what is going into the pockets of the citizens. But if you're asking for like direct numbers, we can get that back to you as to what specific or what metrication we're looking at.
Can I quickly add, Mr. Lightwire, I'm quite not disappointed. Not that you didn't direct any questions to me personally and ask me to apologize for anything. I do look forward to your...
I'm usually stuck when I'm asking questions, Mr. Patterson.
Yes.
So if I'm going to ask you those questions,
Thank you very much.
Sure.
The metric we're using, the highest ever gold production in this country occurred under the APM UFC tenure. Indisputable. It has been gold production, like several other industries, forestry, sugar, has been in a free fall. Has been in a free fall, indisputable numbers that from since the became the office. Right now, the gold production will hit, cannot hit the targeted number. It will barely make, I think, 250,000 ounces, down from a heady height of 700 ounces per annum in the coalition. All every sector, rice in the highest possible matrix level, that metric we're using, and if something is in free fall, obviously that industry is in danger. It's declining. You can see, so it doesn't, you don't have to use anything, and obviously what is happening and what the matrix has been saying is that the sale of heavy equipment to the mining industry, I'm speaking to the gold industry, is declining, which means that all the exporters are going in, taking up the loads to go there. The decorations have declined. The government, as Laura mentioned, the government, the gold and diamond miners, gave them a proposal 13 to the president himself. 13 proposals that they promised to look at. That is since they returned vote. They've looked at only one. And it's like, why may I tell you the country was the one they looked at? Setting up a WhatsApp group so that that's the only one that did that, so that the miners could complain to it. So yes, whatever matrix you want to do, it isn't free fall. Whatever economic matrix you would like to put up, it isn't free fall. And it's not just gold. We're highlighting gold at the moment, but the entire mining sector has been displayed. Fisheries, do your research, sir. Fisheries, people are converting their fishing, and of course, obviously, it's an economic thing. They're fishing space in their walls into walls to serve the oil and gas industry. So that puts of course, decline that industry and automatically raises the product for the youth and the consumer. So you can quote whatever, you can see whatever, but the things are free fall. And one industry alone is dominating. That is the trigger for the disease. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. I'll take two last.
I just want to make a comment.
Yeah.
Answer my question.
Yes, I didn't. Yeah. So the school was closed in 2021, right? And it shouldn't be closed in the first place. So why was the school closed in the first place, sir?
So
I mean,
I'm asking
you have a
you
shortage of nurses.
will it students or teachers? That's the question.
Well,
if someone goes there on Monday,
I'm explaining to you. So the school was closed in 2021. After a public backlash, the school was reopened again, right? But I'm saying here, you have a shortage of nurses and you close the school. Then you say now you have a hybrid program that is in place. So some of the folks are not at the school. Again, there's a lot of, it's very unclear. It's very murky, right? Not to understand what's going on with Charles Rosa.
Let me
in your comments that you made just now, you said that the school was closed.
Allow us to finish.
Mr. Hayes.
You asked a question, allow us to answer them.
There was a follow-up, sir.
So the Charles Rosa School was closed by the PPP government. And if you check, and they said too many, and this is a fact, that Charles Rosa is supposed to cater for Region 9 and Region 2, I think, or Region 7, wherever. The Minister of Health stated that too many residents from Region 10 were being employed. Imagine that, too many nurses were being trained, and the fact that they were coming from Region 10 predominantly, where the school is also naturally. That is the reason he gave for that. Of course, when it is immediately public backlash, immediately the nonsensical decision was challenged. And then they said, oh, that's why they're back. Why you can go there and find people there now? He's never ever gone back and said, what's the composition of the person. They put people of Region 10 at the suffer. Because they wanted to enter into a very noble professional nursing. And then you will come back if you go there now. The people of Region 10 strike. They struck against the REO or the CEO.
David, you're on mute.
I'm not hearing you, sir.
You're muted, David.
I'm not hearing you, Mr. Patterson.
My apology.
Just the last
I'm
part.
saying,
Just the last part.
You heard that?
Yeah. The last part.
Right, but the nurses and the residents of Region 10, they held several strikes against the CEO of Linden, plus the closure of Charles Rosa School. That is why it is open now. That is why you can ask if you go there now. Would not because of any initiative or any improvement. They didn't do any improvement to the Charles Rosa School. Just shut it down. Purely because nurses and men and women from Region 10 took up the offer to go and become nurses.
But in addition to that, David, let me add, because this here is very important. Again, it comes back to this government not understanding how to run anything. The bottom line is that this government, at the same time they shut down the Charles Rosa School of Nursing in Linden, and I've spoken about it several times, they were at the same time talking about recruiting people from Bangladesh, nurses from Bangladesh and other places. So that doesn't make, you don't have to be an expert or have medical knowledge to understand. That is stupidity or something else. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that while they were also doing that, they were also opening new nursing schools in other regions.
Yeah.
So I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So whether it's open today or not, that's not a good answer, by the way. That to say that well, because it's opening today, that's an excuse for the decision.
So with all due respect to you, persons of the panel said that the school was closed. They didn't say it was a hybrid program. They didn't say it was closed and reopened. Persons on this panel right now said to us shortly ago
that the school was closed, not halfway open, not hybrid.
Sorry.
No. Mr. Sir, we never said that the school was closed. Adam Harris said the school was closed. And we offered verification that the school was closed in 2021 and then
Colin?
the public backlash.
Colin, I think this issue is closed. I'm closing it.
Yeah, we want to take one final question from Shamar Musa.
It's frozen.
Yes, good afternoon. Mr. Hughes, just one question here from me. Actually, I have two questions, sorry, but the first one, did you complete your analysis of the events during the 2020 electoral process?
Sorry, can you repeat that? All I heard is did I complete my analysis of something?
Yes, I was asking if you completed your analysis of the events during the 2020 electoral process.
Did I undertake to conduct an analysis?
If my memory serves me correct, you did say that that is something that you would do. And the question was.
Oh, you mean? Oh, sorry. You mean when I was elected leader? You're talking about a review of the party's role while it was in office, and also what happened during the 2020 election. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. No, we haven't completed that as yet. No, sorry. We're actually going to do that. Actually, as you mentioned, that one of the parts of that process is we're hoping to meet with GCOM. We've asked to meet with them for the last 4 to 5 weeks, and they've refused to meet with us. And part of our analysis of that includes meeting with GCOM.
Thank you very much.
There's one more question. Oh, sorry.
There are several issues which only GCOM can clear up. And that's why we've asked, and GCOM has promised us. And this is since July, we requested a meeting. It's now 3 months, and GCOM has steadfastly refused to meet with us as a party. So that we can put several questions to them for clarification, because as you know, GCOM is the only, or is the organization that runs an election, so therefore they will be instructive in providing us with some information which is required.
All right. Any follow-up question there, Mr. Musa, or that's it?
Yeah, I have one more question. There have been comments in the media that attempts to form a coalition with a coordinated effort to weaken public trust in the government, rather than a genuine attempt to present alternative solutions or policies. Is the opposition, for instance, prepared to demonstrate to the public that they are prepared to recognize the will of the people at the next election?
Well, a couple of things. One, I think, is the government on its own is weakening public trust in its performance by itself. It doesn't need the opposition to do that. Two, we believe the electorate is savvy enough to know what is an orchestrated attempt or not. Three, I can't speak for the entire opposition. I can only speak for the Alliance for Change, and the Alliance for Change has always recognized results of elections, even though from the time they entered into politics, they have been denied a seat, and it is not until the end of the term do they get a court ruling on it. So you know from 2006, they stole a seat, 2011, they stole a seat. So if there is a perpetual victim of GCOM's actions and accepting the result, it is the Alliance for Change. So despite having had a seat taken from us in 2 elections, we have always abided by the result.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much, everyone here at the head table and those online, media representatives. This has brought us to the end of today, Friday, 13th of December, Alliance for Change press conference.